Hey guys, it's Josh here from Bogren Digital, and we're here to check out our new drum instrument, Eloy Drums. If you've been hiding under a rock for the last few years, Eloy Casagrande has been voted Metal Drummer of the Year for 2024. He's the current drummer for Slipknot. He's played in Sepultura. It's hard to deny how insanely talented he is. We're not messing about today. We've got a lot to get through, so we're going to get straight into it. So here we are in Eloy Drums, and this is the Casa Grande kit. And as you can see, it is pretty grande. You get two choices of kit with Eloy Drums. You get this one, the Casa Grande, but you also get a Casa Groove kit. With Contact 8, this is the default view. They've hidden a few things that you used to get at the top with previous versions. And if you want to bring those back, because it makes it a little bit easier to switch between the two libraries, you come up here to the view, you click, and you come down to either Show Classic View, which is how it was in Contact 7, or what I'm going to do is just show the instrument header. Once you've opened the instrument header, you can see that we've got Elo Drums Casa Grande, and then we've got our presets here as well, which we'll go over later. But here where it says Eloy Drums Casa Grande, if we come all the way to the right, we've got two little arrow keys, and we click these, we can switch easily between the two kits. So here we are with the Casa Groove kit, which is obviously more focused and refined. You get the nice addition of a left floor tom, which is always fun to play around with. We've got a different selection of cymbals and shells for both kits, and the snare options are different for each kit, with a couple of them shared between them. If you want to learn more about the complete kit rundown, you can find that on the website. The Casa Grande kit is inspired by Eloy's touring kit with Slipknot. So we've got 3 rack toms, 2 floor toms, a kick for each foot, and a variety of cymbals, including a nice stack, a little bell over here, and of course, the elephant in the room, the gong. And the sustain on that's about 3 business days, give or take. The shells are a Tama Star Classic Bubinga. You've got 3 rack toms, 2 floor toms, and a kick for each foot. I'm afraid these ones on the end are just for show. The snares, you have 6 options. So you have Bell Brass 1980, damped and non-damped. You have a Premier damped and non-damped. And then you have a Supertonic and a Black Beauty with this kit. I'll just have a quick click around and you can hear what each different kit piece sounds like. So as you can hear, it's a really nice and balanced kit with a lot of versatility from all the cymbals and the snare options that you get. I mean, some of these snares sound absolutely massive, and part of that is to do with where it was recorded. Both of these kits were recorded at Fascination Street Studio in the main live room, which is a massive space, but it's also got no parallel surfaces or anything like that. So you get this really nice buttery smooth decay in the room, no rings or boxiness, nothing like that. So jumping back across to the Casa Groove kit, this one, the shells are based on DW and Pearl kit pieces. The Casa Groove kit takes inspiration from Eloy's time in Sepultura. And the snare options on this one are a little bit different. We've got a bell brass, but this time from 79, damped and non-damped. We have the Supertonic, but low and high tuned. We've got a Cannon Puss and a Black Raven. Again, if you want to geek out on the snare drums that were recorded for this, all of that information is on the website. So with the Casa Groove kit, we've just got the 2 rack toms and 2 floor toms, one on the right and one on the left, and a little bit of a more refined selection of cymbals, where we still got some great options here in terms of versatility, especially if you were to mix the 2 kits together. So there really is a smorgasbord of options with these two kits, and you'll find that there's pretty much a sound for any occasion, especially if you start messing around with things like the pitch controls, which we'll get into later. Let's have a click through this kit as well so you can hear what everything sounds like. Oh, and I forgot to mention, with both kits, the Casa Grande and the Casa Groove, each kick has a high and a low tuning. Here's a quick back-to-back of each kit using a groove and the default preset for each one. If you're familiar with past Bogren digital drum libraries, then you'll know about these little guys up here, the anti-machine gun and auto double kick. But if not, I'll just briefly run over them. The anti-machine gun algorithm helps to make fast runs sound more organic. So essentially what it's doing is, if you were to program a fast snare roll, for example, all on the same velocity, then it will cycle through a lot of different samples of center hits, right hits, left hits, all that kind of stuff, just to make it feel like a real drummer is playing that roll. The auto double kick feature is a pretty cool one as well. If you're not super experienced and you're not sure exactly when a real drummer would start to play with 2 feet instead of 1, then you can program all of the kick drum hits on the 1 kick, and the auto double kick, once the speed gets fast enough that it would be natural for a drummer to play with both feet, it will start auto-distributing those hits across the 2 kicks instead of just the 1. So if you load either kit as usual, it will start up with the default preset, which in this case is the Jens Bogren F Street Grande. But if you come up here and click on the drop down, you can see that we've had a bit of help in creating these presets. So if you come up here to the drop down, you can see that we've had a bit of help with creating presets for this library. There's some big names here, and I'm not going to go through them all. So if you want to pause the video and just have a look at how cool this collection of producers is, go ahead. And these presets are specific for each kit, so the list is different for the Casa Groove kit. And here's the list for the Casa Groove kit. If you want to get an idea of what each of these will sound like, there's an audio examples section on the website, but we ain't got time for that today. We're going to get straight on to the next section, which is the mixer window. So we've been hanging out in the nice, pretty kit view. If we go up here and click on mixer, we get to see how the sausage is made. So this might look a little bit overwhelming, but if that's the case, you can always just start with a preset. But if you want to dive into the details of a preset to see how it sounds the way it does, or you want to mix the drums from scratch yourself, this is the place to do it. And fun fact, if you've seen the Eloy Drums promo video, the drums for that song were mixed entirely within this contact instrument. So this mixer section is not a gimmick at all. You can get properly professional sounding drums entirely mixing within this instrument. Starting from the top, you have pan controls across here for each channel, except for the overhead and the room, which are width controls. So all the way left is mono, all the way right is stereo. You then have faders for each channel. You have solo and mute buttons for each channel. And like I mentioned before, you can select the module view for each channel by clicking on the channel name. So as you click through these, you'll probably notice that some of them also have an additional mixer section down here, a submix. For example, this kick main and kick 2, but also for the overheads, you have control over each of the different cymbal elements. Jumping down here to the effects section, we have these inserts. So if I clear these, you can see that we've got 4 options: an EQ, compressor, transient, saturation. I guess 5 options if you include no insert. But each of these options is essentially a mini plugin within the Kontakt instrument, which are loadable in each slot. And you can change the order of them essentially by changing which one is in each slot, but you can have multiple instances of each one as well. Once they're loaded in, you can bypass and activate them by clicking this on-off button on the right-hand side. And of course, you can just click and drag to interact with the controls, as you might expect. Moving rightwards, these are the sends to the master reverb. So we click on master, we can see reverb short, long. If we go back to kick, we can see sends, reverb short, reverb long. These knobs control how much of the selected channel is sent to those master reverbs. To the right of that, we have the envelope section. So we have an attack, hold, decay, and an on-off switch up here. By default, this envelope section is off, but if you want to turn it on, you can click on this button and it will light up to indicate that. So this envelope section is not to be confused with the transient section here in the modules. The difference being that the transient section is as if you'd applied a plugin after you'd recorded the kick. The envelope section is actually affecting the kick sample itself in all of the mics. So the kick mic, obviously, but then also the overhead and the room. So if you adjust the decay down, it's going to affect the selected channel, but it's also going to affect the kick sound, for example, in this case, on the overhead and the room. So you might be wondering what the different use cases are for the transient and the envelope shaper. One example is using the envelope shaper to create a smaller sounding room. So if you were to apply a shorter decay time for each of the drum shells, this will also apply that sound like we discussed in the overhead and the room, which is essentially going to make the reverb tail for each of those elements shorter. So you can take a really long decay, which is the default in this instrument, and make the kit sound like it was recorded in a smaller room instead. Here's a quick demonstration of that. I'll solo the room so you can hear it more clearly. So here's the natural room. And here's a quick emulation of a smaller room. Final couple of controls down here are the pitch controls. The pitch control essentially adjusts the tuning of the drum. So if I was to play this groove and adjust the tuning of the snare, you'll hear the effect of this pitch control. And the final thing in the effects section is this bleed control section down here in the bottom right. So for most of the channels, you have an overhead and a room bleed control. And these controls affect the level of the selected channel in the overhead and the room channels over here. One thing worth noting is that the overhead obviously doesn't have an overhead bleed and the room doesn't have any bleed controls at all. I tell a lie, there is one more thing in this effects section that we haven't gone over, which is this link toms button. And this button only appears for the tom channels. And what it allows you to do, it's on by default, but it allows you to adjust these bleed controls across all of the tom channels at once. You see, if I turn the room down on channel 3, tom 3, it's turned down on tom 1, tom 2, tom 4, and tom 5 as well. But if I unlink and I turn the room up on tom 5, the other ones remain unaffected. The trig channels or the trigger channels offer a different view than the mic channels. With these trigger channels, you have the option of loading a round robin sample from the Jens Bogren Signature Drums sample pack, or you can drag your own custom one-shot into this area over here that says drag and drop. This channel, trig K, corresponds to the kick. That's what the K stands for. So every time the kick is played, it's going to trigger whatever samples are loaded in here. And these samples are used to augment the natural sound of the kick, or indeed the snare, which is this trig S1 over here. On the trigger channels, you get controls which may be familiar to you since we've gone over them before. We've got some faders, a pitch control for each sample, and these sends to the reverb long and short. But you can also mute each sample that you've loaded, or over here you can clear anything that you've dragged and dropped into this custom one-shot area. And finally, with the trigger channels, you've got the polarity reverse button, and this can be used to solve any phase issues that you have between your custom one-shot and the other sounds. And the final area of interest is the master view. So here, as we discussed earlier, you have reverb long and short. So the amount is the level of the reverb, and the decay is the length of the reverb, and you can mute each one individually. Parallel compression is an SSL bus style compression, so you get your usual threshold, stepped ratio, attack and release controls, makeup and mix. And you can bypass and activate each of these modules by clicking on this in button. So when it's lit, the effect is in, and when it's not, it's out. You've got a 6-band graphical master EQ here with the affected frequency range indicated above each of the sliders. And then finally, you have a master tape module, which is a tape saturation emulation. So you've got drive, which is going to change the amount of distortion, a tone, which will apply either a darker or a brighter sound to that distortion, and a trim control to adjust the output level of this module. All of the individual channels are sent to this master bus, and these effects that you find in the master section are applied to the entire drum mix. Just below the channel selection buttons, you can see that there's this little drop down that says master. I won't go into too much detail because we have a dedicated guide on how to do this, but clicking on this drop down gives you options to route each individual channel to a channel on your DAW for more flexibility in mixing. By default, they're just all routed to the master output in Contact. Swiftly moving on, next to the mixer, we have the grooves page. And this page contains all of the grooves, the MIDI grooves, that Eloy performed himself. You can see here that we've got the Eloy Casagrande MIDI pack. The reason we display this folder as the top folder is that you can actually add your own MIDI groove packs into Eloy Drums if you wish. And if you want to learn how to do that, all the information is in the user manual. The second level is these folders that contain groups of grooves. So we've grouped these by tempo, as you can see, but also by style or genre. And within each of these folders, you get a ton of grooves and fills with an indicated BPM. Now, we had a fun time putting these together because when these came through with the indicated BPMs, we played them back at those BPMs and they sounded like inhumanly fast. But nope, that's just exactly how Eloy played it. He's just that good. So when you're in here, if you double click on a groove, it will begin playing that groove. And the groove can be paused like I just did by pressing this play button up here, or in fact, this play button in here. And the groove stays active on each of the pages at the top here in this little box. The playback speed options here, half, 1 times and 2 times, control the playback speed, funnily enough. So you rightly might be wondering why these are here and what they're useful for. Well, for instance, my DAW is set to 120 BPM at the moment, but I'd quite like to preview these at roughly the right tempo without having to change the tempo of my DAW. At the moment, this 1 times is going to play this 6/8 groove at 120 BPM, but 2 times makes 240, which is much closer to this 218 indicated BPM. In this case, I can quickly, without having to change the tempo in my DAW, select the 2 times option and play these grooves at double 120 BPM. So that's pretty close to this 218. So just to demonstrate, here's at 1 times. Sounds way too slow, right? But if I click on the 2 times, I can hear this groove much closer to how it was originally intended. So you might be thinking, yeah, these grooves sound cool, but how am I supposed to use them for my songs? If you come up here to the top where the groove name is displayed, and in the right-hand side of this box, there is a drag MIDI label. And the clue is in the name. If you click and drag from this label, you can drag the MIDI straight into your DAW and use it in your session. With this method, it's quite easy to build up quite a complicated drum part for a song just by dragging in different grooves and fills into your DAW. Now we're moving on to the really interesting settings pages. First of all, something that is actually quite interesting is the Casa Grande kit is actually so grande that it requires 2 mapping pages, which none of our kits have needed before. So on this page, you can customize your MIDI mapping. So whether you're using an E-kit or you just rather have things laid out in a certain way in your DAW, you can come in here and use these drop downs to select a note that you want a specific articulation to be assigned to. The alternative is to click the relevant Learn button. And if you click this, it's going to flash until it receives an input for a note, and then it will automatically assign the appropriate articulation to the note that you have inputted. As you can see here, there are also 2 different note options for each articulation across the 2 mapping pages. Another useful thing that you can do from these mapping pages is audition each of the different articulations. In the kit view, you just get a snare when you click on the snare, but here you can see that we've got hit, off-center, flam, no wires and side stick, so we can hear what each of those sound like. And that can be really useful for when you're first loading the kit up and you want to see what it's capable of, or for later on in your mapping journey when you're trying to figure out what openness of hi-hat you want for a particular mapping. Now, we are aware that there are other drum libraries available, and so we have made it easy for you to make the switch to Eloy Drums by including these mapping presets of various different well-known drum libraries. So you can load up an old session with an old drum library, select it here in the list, and it will map to Eloy Drums. The other couple of useful options here are for E-kit users. Roland and Yamaha, we have dedicated mappings for each of those. Moving on with velocity to the velocities tab. Here we have curves for the global velocity and for each individual kit piece. Now these I won't go over in too much detail, but they're mainly for E-kit users who want to get the optimal performance and touch sensitivity from Eloy Drums. And you can adjust each of these by just clicking and dragging to change the curve. Another quick thing on this page is the auto double kick sensitivity. This just allows you to adjust the threshold of the auto double kick to your liking. So those are all the pages that you'll run into in Eloy Drums, but let me give you a few tips to get you using it like a pro. First up is the difference between choke and choke hits. So it's easiest if I just demonstrate to begin with. So as you can hear, the crash hit can be choked by triggering the crash choke. And so this allows you to have a cymbal ring out for however long you want before it is grabbed by the drummer. So the other option, the choke hit, has the grab baked in after a certain amount of time. And so this obviously makes it less flexible, but there are certain situations where this could be desired. We're also aware that there's some confusion around velocities and what you should be using and when. So the first thing to note is that with Bogren Digital libraries, 127 will sound good. You don't need to worry too much about the velocities that you're using. And actually, Eloy hits really hard, so you might actually find yourself using 127 reasonably often if you're trying to emulate his style. But a good place to start is between 100 and 110 for hard hits. And you'll find that with the snares, there is a threshold where it goes from a snare hit to a rim shot. So we've made sure that that crossover point in velocity is a hard line, so that if you program your backbeat to have rim shots, they will be rim shots every time. And if you wanted to use lower velocities, for example, when you're programming a groove with ghost notes, you're not going to have random rim shots just poking themselves in and out. Along with the settings that you have control over, anti-machine gun, auto double kick, etc. There's also an always on algorithm fiddling away in the background at all times to especially make sure that your tom fills are always clear and natural sounding. You really don't have to worry too much about humanizing your MIDI on the way in. So there you go, that's Eloy Drums. And as you can see, we've held nothing back. This is a massive library with a lot of cool sounds and a lot of cool things packed in. You might even say it's worth it just for the gong. Go to bogrendigital.com to check it out, and I'll see you next time.